Hello, feral friends and fellow nature nerds. Thank you for tuning in to Dirt Dispatch number 28. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. So a couple of things I want to tell you about, but I'm going to start with my wildlife observations because I've seen some really cool stuff this week. First was a vulture. Now, you might be thinking, Tim, that's not that unusual or exciting, but in this case, I was actually able to get closer than normal. So it was on the ground across the street from Dispatch's HQ here, and it wasn't eating, it was just on the ground. And I was documenting it for the Wyoming Vulture Watch, a community science project that documents turkey vulture sightings here in Wyoming. I wanted to get a good picture of it for the submission because, well, it's rare to be able to get a good picture. And this vulture was letting me get unusually close, within 4 or 5 feet without flying away. It would hop or walk a short distance, but it wouldn't fly, at least not more than just a foot or two, which made me think that maybe it was injured. So on a side note, when I first saw him, I texted a picture to my wife who responded, "Rescue him for me. Want, now, need giant bird." Then she immediately named it Alistair, Big Al for short. And that, my friends, is why we've been married for almost 30 years. So I started to make some phone calls. First, I called the Rocky Mountain Raptor Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, just about 45 miles south of here. The very nice woman I spoke with told me that they could take Big Al if Wyoming Fish and Game picked him up, because there was this whole procedure and permits that they would need to transport it across state lines. That's all well and good, except it was a Sunday, so of course Fish and Game wasn't open. My next call was to a local rehabber, hoping that they would have a Fish and Game contact, which they did, sort of. She told me to call the Wyoming Poaching Tip Line, and the people there would be able to help, and she was right. The wonderful lady who answered my call took my information and told me that she would have the biologist call me back. And he did in just a few minutes. After describing to him what I was seeing, no visible injuries, no neurological symptoms that might indicate lead or other poisoning, he suggested that perhaps Big Al just gorged himself and was simply unable to get off the ground right now. I mean, honestly, I can kind of relate, and probably so can you. So I kept an eye on him for the next several hours, and as he hopped and walked and occasionally glided a few feet, he gradually moved farther away, but he was still out in the big open field and not really flying. But turns out that biologist knows his stuff, because a few hours later I saw Big Al still on the ground in the middle of the large open field, and 10 minutes later he was gone without a trace. Fair winds and following seas, Big Al. Now, while I was monitoring Big Al, I got a text from a friend with a picture of a snapping turtle, informing me that it was at the nearby lake. So, partially because I was also contributing to another community science project, the City Nature Challenge, and partially because, well, snapping turtle, I headed out there. Snapping turtles, at least common snapping turtles, are native to Wyoming, but it's still pretty rare to see one here since they live in or near water, and this is a semi-arid climate. Plus, we're kind of towards the western edge of their range. I mean, snapping turtles certainly aren't climbing up and over the Rocky Mountains on their own, so it was another neat sighting. Finally, and maybe most exciting for me, was a moose sighting. I was mountain biking out at Kurt Gowdy State Park, a place, my happy place, that I've mentioned before, about 30 miles west of here. I was coming down one of the trails and just entered a more open area, and the moose crossed in front of me, thankfully at a safe distance. I happened to be recording with my GoPro at the time and caught it on camera, so if you want to see the video, check out my YouTube channel. It's the video titled Gold Standard Trail, parentheses, with a moose. A little farther down the trail, I saw it again and stopped to take a picture, again from a safe and respectful distance. Moose can be dangerous. In fact, they cause more injuries than any other animal in North America, and worldwide, they're second only to hippos. I didn't know it at the time, but this was a male. I only found that out when I zoomed in on the picture, and I could see the beginnings of his new rack of antlers starting to grow. But I'll tell you what, seeing that moose made my day. Okay, so one last thing I want to talk about. The other night, I was furiously typing on my phone, and my wife looked over and said, "Are you fighting with people on the internet again?" To which I replied, "It's not fighting, it's educating." But yes. But I added, "Here's why." And I showed her the picture I was commenting on and told her what some of the people were saying. And she responded, "That's dumb," and proceeded to list the ways in which it was dumb. See, I said that's why I need to educate them. Now, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you know that when I when I educate strangers on the internet, it's usually about coyotes. But to my credit, not this time. No, this time I had to come to another animal's defense: porcupines. The picture was of a porcupine in a tree, and it was posted on a social media group dedicated to photography of things in Wyoming. Now, it's not a wildlife photography group per se, but it tends to contain a lot of wildlife photography just the same. Now, while most people were leaving positive comments, there are always a few people that, for whatever reason, feel the need to hate on wild animals. For whatever reason, they'll pick up on any negative aspect of that animal, no matter how slight, and they'll run with it. The only thing I can figure is that somehow it makes them feel special and important, like they have the knowledge to protect people from all these wild animals that would otherwise endanger us all. Now, I know that porcupines can be considered a pest. They do cause some problems. They're attracted to salt, and they're known to chew on boots and gloves or tool handles that are left outside, and other things that are made of wood, because salts are sometimes used in the process of treating wood or tanning leather. And yes, they can damage trees. But let's look at some of these things. One commenter said, "They reproduce at an alarming rate," which actually made me laugh a little bit. Alarming rate? Really? Porcupines have a longer gestation than most rodents, a little under 7 months, and they generally give birth to a single porcupette. One. It's possible for them to have twins, but it's extremely rare. So if you do the math, 7 times 30 minus 365, yeah, that's one offspring per year. If that's what passes for an alarming rate, wait until that guy learns what rabbits can do. "They kill trees," people were crying. Okay, yes, especially during winter when other sources of food are scarce, they eat tree bark and can strip the bark from tree trunks and branches, which can damage the tree and may eventually lead to its death. But to hear these commenters tell it, you'd think that porcupines are roaming the forest in hordes, decimating the trees, and that's just not the case. And not just because porcupines are solitary and just don't have the population density to have a major impact on forests. According to the U.S. Forest Service, when it comes to forest health, quote, "On a regional scale, high mortality levels may indicate widespread impacts of one or more factors, including insects, disease, fire, drought, or major storms," unquote. You might notice that missing from that list is porcupines. And here's the thing. Trees and porcupines have been getting along just fine together for millions of years. I would even suggest that if the damage from a porcupine kills a tree, maybe that's okay. A dead tree attracts insects, which in turn attracts woodpeckers. The holes made by woodpeckers are used by cavity nesting birds like tufted titmice and chickadees and bluebirds and tree swallows. The birds people love seeing at their backyard feeders, in other words. As those holes get bigger, they'll be used by other animals like squirrels and owls and raccoons. And if that tree falls and rots, it will provide habitat for detritivores like millipedes and pollinators like carpenter bees. So I would argue that by killing the occasional tree, porcupines are actually providing an important ecological service. "But then it can fall on your house or crush your car," one commenter added in defense. As my 17-year-old often says, "Look, buddy, I don't know what to tell you. If a tree dies, no matter what the cause, porcupine or other, and it's a hazard in danger of falling on a structure or a vehicle, then yes, it should be removed. If you fail to do that and it falls on your car, that's kind of on you. It's not like the damage from the porcupine killed the tree immediately. That would have been years in the process of dying and rotting to the point of coming down. And if porcupines are really that big a concern, there are easy ways to protect trees and gardens with low fencing or aluminum flashing around the trunks of trees. They can carry rabies, was another comment. Really? You're concerned about porcupines as a rabies vector? Can they carry rabies? Yeah, sure. Can they transmit rabies? Again, yeah, sure, but in order to do that, they'd have to bite you or your pet. Let me repeat that. In order to transmit rabies, this slow-moving, herbivorous, quill-covered rodent would need to bite you. How likely do you think that is? I mean, biting isn't exactly what porcupines are known for. They've got that whole quill-covered thing going on. Which, of course, brings us to the issue of animals getting pin-cushioned. The same commenter worried about rabid porcupines said, "If you own livestock or have curious pets, you will spend hours ripping quills out of their faces." And the reproduce at an alarming rate guy said that they will, quote, "eat chicken eggs," they won't, by the way, "kill a dog, goat, any small farm animal, and it's not a quick death, enough quills, and it's a long, painful death," unquote. I think he hated punctuation almost as much as he hates porcupines. But he goes on, quote, "Can you imagine your child running to the barn or yard and ending up with quills in their body? They're not like most wild animals. They don't run off or be scared off," unquote. That's a lot to unpack, right? Porcupines are not predators. They're not out hunting dogs or goats or chickens or children. And they're not aggressive. Their whole thing is defense. When a porcupine feels threatened, they do everything they can to warn that threat to stay away and leave them alone. First, they raise their quills. And yes, in this position, when they're raised, the quills come out very easily if they come in contact with something, like a curious pet or someone like a child without the sense to not hug a porcupine. Second, they chatter their teeth and shiver so their quills rattle. So they produce an auditory signal as well as a visual one. They even produce a smell, said to smell like BO or moldy cheese, from a spot on their back. So they're using 3 of the 5 senses to say, "Leave me the heck alone." If they can, they'll climb a tree to escape a threat. They don't run off, not because they're aggressive or not afraid, but because they're slow. They don't really run, period. If they don't have a tree to climb, and if every other warning has failed, they might back up or move sideways towards the threat, hoping that the threat will retreat. And if it doesn't, well, yeah, that threat can end up with a bunch of souvenirs from the encounter. Is it painful for the recipient? I'm sure, no doubt. Fatal, though? Rarely. There's a chance of swelling and infection, which is more of a risk for a wild predator than a domestic one, since domestic animals can be treated by a vet. And even more rare would be if a quill pierces deep enough to hit an internal organ. But quills aren't daggers. They're not even toothpicks. They're about the size of a toothpick, but think of them more like those tiny cocktail straws. They're sharp on the ends, but they tend to bend and be a bit flexible in the middle. And again, if porcupines are known to be around, maybe you need to take some precautions to reduce the risk to your dog or other animals. Things like fencing and supervision. Whew! Like I said earlier, I think there are some people that just look for excuses to hate wild animals. I don't understand it. So I guess I'll just have to keep educating people. It's what I do. Okay, feral friends, hope you are all doing well. If you'd like to support the podcast, consider becoming a patron. Check out all the details at patreon.com/dispatchesfromtheforest. You can also donate using the Cash App and the hashtag ForestNerd, or using PayPal and my email address, dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com. That email address also works if you want to, send me an email. I'm always open to suggestions, questions, and comments. Check out the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatches from the forest. Click on products and get yourself some awesome Dispatches from the Forest merch. Finally, you can follow Dispatches from the Forest on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.